Hi, this is Dr. Greg Mendel, your friendly anatomy professor. We are doing the second part of the review of the skull. On the first video, we went over the external structures of the skull, and we're going to go over now some of the harder to see parts, which is maybe the holes in the orbited eye and that sort of thing. So when we look at this, I angled this so that I think you could see through here, but we can see there are three openings, and we have a very large slotted opening here, one back here, and one here. The one here is actually if you'd see how it comes out, it's a canal, and this is called the optic canal. And the optic canal has the optic nerves travel through, and you can see that the angle that as they come through, basically they cross. And the reason they cross is we have the optic chiasma, where the basically the line of sight crosses with as far as where the nerves come in. When we look at the eye from the orbit of the eye from the front, we can see there's a slot here. That is called the superior orbital fissure. Underneath the one, and by the way, the superior orbital fissure comes out into the cranial cavity, as you can see here. But the inferior orbital fissure, as you can see, comes out in the outside of the cranial cavity. So we have those three bones there. When we look at this from the top view, we can see that there are 1, 2, 3 in a row here. And this opening is called the foramen rotundum, the foramen ovale, and the foramen spinosum. And the way I remember those is review of skull from front to back. So review would be R, rotundum, of ovale, and you can see it's even oval shaped, and spinosum is really small. You could barely put the stick in it. So review of skull, foramen rotundum, foramen ovale, foramen spinosum. We could see the foramen lucerum here in the center. When we flip the skull upside down, I don't know if we can get through the ovale or not. We'll give it a shot. When we flip the skull upside down, and I'm going to take the jaw off, you can see the two holes here. The one that I'm trying to wiggle here that just fell out was the foramen lucerum, and this is the foramen ovale with the spinosum right behind it. Back to the front, so we had the foramen rotundum, foramen ovale, foramen spinosum, the foramen lucerum. Then we could see, and in your lab book, it almost looks like, your lecture book, it almost looks like they're tagging this as the carotid canal. This is not. The carotid canal, as you can see, at an angle, it goes back at a 45-degree angle, and it's quite crowded. So I remember that as the crowded carotid. And the way that the carotid goes through, you can see where it comes out here on the bottom. The lucerum is opening here, the ovale and spinosum, but the carotid is at a weird angle. It's a 45-degree angle. If you look back, there's a large opening behind it. That is for the jugular vein. That is the jugular foramen. So the carotid canal has the carotid artery going through. The jugular foramen, which comes out here, is for the jugular vein. Again, the way I remember that, crowded carotid and room to juggle. So there's all this room back here. We could see an opening on the inside here. Now, again, this is the temporal bone. The reason this is all raised up is because we have the malleus, incus, and stapes, the three bones, the ossicles for hearing inside this area here, the temporal bone. So this is an opening for the nerve. In fact, it's the vestibulocochlear nerve. And what we have here is the internal acoustic meatus. And so the nerve basically is going through this hole here. On the outside, we see it as the external acoustic meatus. So we have the opening for our ear there. We have the foramen magnum down here at the bottom, and we have our spinal cord going through that area. If we look at the inside of the skull, we have three other areas. This is like the top shelf, a middle shelf, and then a back area. So this is known as the anterior cranial fossa, the middle cranial fossa, and the posterior cranial fossa. Up here we see the ethmoid bone, and the ethmoid bone extends from the top here down to this perpendicular plate within the septum where it meets up with the vomer. So the perpendicular bone, when we look at it, it has this thing in the dead center called the crista galla, And then we have a little groove on each side. Now the reason for this groove is the olfactory nerve and bulb is lying in here. This is called the cribriform plate, the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. And you don't see it very well in this skull, but in some you can see little bitty holes. And these little bitty holes are basically going down and opening into the superior roof of the floor, or sorry, roof of the nasal cavity, which is basically forming the little extensions off the nerve for smell. And so those are called the cribriform foramina. Cribriform foramina. We have the frontal sinus here under these two bumps. If you look at the center of the skull, we see this bone sticking up. And so this bone sticking up, this entire area here, is an area called the sella turcica. And the sella turcica is kind of looking like a little western horse saddle, if you kind of think of it like that. It has a little indentation inside of it, and that indentation is called the hypophyseal fossa of the sella turcica. The reason they call it the hypophyseal fossa is a fossa, again, is a shallowed out basin area, but the hypophyseal gland is actually the pituitary gland, and so the pituitary gland fits right here in this area. Here we have the sphenoid bone, and this is considered the lesser wing of the sphenoid bone, and down under here is the greater wing of the sphenoid bone. I believe that we covered the majority of these structures, and I think that will be it for this video.